It was a gray, cloudy day on the island of Sodor. Thomas the tank engine was at Elsbridge with Annie and Clarabelle. He was waiting for Henry to arrive with his passengers. "Where is that Henry?" Thomas grumbled to no one in particular. "Doesn't he know I have a schedule to keep to?" At last he heard a familiar whistle, and the big green engine wheeshed into the station. "I'm sorry I'm late," he panted. "Some idiot signalman forgot to set the points, and I almost crashed into Gordon." Thomas was about to retort when an owl landed on top of the station building and hooted. Henry jumped in fright. "What's the matter, Henry?" said Thomas cheekily. "Scared of a little old owl, are you? Or are you remembering the time you thought you saw a ghost in the fog?" Henry snorted. The little blue tank engine often loved teasing him about his incident with owls and fog. "Fog is nothing to joke about," Henry said. "It can cause accidents if you're not careful, and it can cause you to see things that aren't there." "Pah!" snorted Thomas. "What nonsense! You're just being a scaredy engine." It was lucky for Thomas that his guard blew the whistle. With a cheeky toot of his whistle, he pulled out of the station, leaving a rather cross Henry behind. As Thomas puffed down the line, he couldn't stop thinking about what Henry had said. "See things in the mist," he muttered. "Ha! What a lark!" Alongside Thomas's branch line is a small viaduct. It crosses a small river before continuing on down the line. It had been built alongside the branch line and was beginning to show its age. The Fat Controller had ordered the Farquhar engines to be very careful when crossing it until we could arrange for an inspection. As Thomas neared the viaduct, he saw that the signal just before it was red. Grumbling, Thomas came to a stop. "Oh, bother!" he groaned. "What now?" "There must be trouble ahead," his driver said. "We better go investigate." He and the fireman climbed down from the cab and walked off into the distance. As soon as they were gone, a light mist started to roll in. Soon, it had turned into a thick fog, which seemed to swallow the area whole. Thomas remembered Henry's words about seeing things in the fog. "Pah," he huffed. "It's just a load of nonsense." But as the fog swirled and danced around him, he found himself doubting his own words. Suddenly, Thomas saw something. There, on the other side of the viaduct, was the shadowy outline of an engine. Thomas squinted, trying to get a better look at it. The engine seemed to be in an all-black livery, almost looking as if it was made entirely out of shadows. Even though its face was obscured by the fog, it seemed to be staring at him. The air grew colder, and Thomas felt an intense chill pass through his frames. "Thomas?" Thomas jumped and looked around. His driver and fireman were climbing back into his cab. "Are you all right?" asked the driver. "You looked spaced out there." Thomas looked around. The mysterious engine was nowhere to be seen. Yeah, I'm fine," Thomas said after a bit, trying to sound brave. "Just a bit tired, I guess." His driver didn't seem convinced, but decided not to press the issue. "Anyway, the signalman said that everything is fine. Some of Toby's trucks had broken away from his train, and they needed to clear the line. We can go now." Thomas, more than relieved to get away from the viaduct, steamed off. Later, Thomas was delivering some empty trucks to the quarry. The fog was still around, and it seemed to have gotten thicker. The trucks were being noisy and rude, but Thomas wasn't concerned with them. His mind was lingering on the mystery engine. "I wonder who that engine was," Thomas thought to himself. It didn't look like anyone I know, and I don't remember the Fat Controller saying anything about a new engine. Unless Henry was right. As Thomas neared the quarry, the wind whipped around his wheels and made an eerie whistling sound. Brrr, shivered Thomas. I'll be glad to get back to my nice warm shed. But then, Thomas heard something else. Mixed with the howls of the wind was the distant but familiar sound of an engine's puffing. Thomas looked all around, but the fog was so thick he couldn't see anything. But he could still hear the puffing of the engine, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind swept right through Thomas. The puffing was right in front of him, and he could hear the sound of wheels clattering on the tracks. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the sounds faded, leaving only the wind behind. Did you hear that? Thomas nervously asked. Hear what? His driver replied. That puffing! Thomas exclaimed. It sounded just like another engine. Thomas, we're the only ones on the line right now, said the fireman. The fog must be playing tricks on you. Thomas stammered, trying to come up with a counterpoint, but he couldn't. So he just shut his mouth and continued on to the quarry. Thomas worked hard all day. The busy workload helped distract him, and he soon forgot about the mysterious engine and the disembodied puffing. It was getting late by the time Thomas was finally able to retire to the sheds. He was exhausted and eager for a good night's sleep. As he rolled into his berth, he noticed Percy and Toby chatting about the day's events. Thomas, too tired to join in, simply closed his eyes and fell fast asleep. Thomas woke up with a start. He didn't know how long he had been asleep for, but he did know what had woken him. An engine's whistle. He looked around. The fog was now even thicker than before, completely swallowing the yards. All Thomas could see was the white glow of the yard lights, illuminated through the dense fog. Then Thomas looked ahead and nearly shrieked in terror. Barely visible through the fog and the door windows was the mysterious engine from earlier. Only now, Thomas could see its face, and it terrified him to his core. The engine's face seemed to be covered in dirt and grime. Dark, heavy bags hung under its eyes, which were nothing more but black husks with little pinpoints of light in the center. Its smile was sick and demented, stretching and twisting to an unnatural degree, giving it the impression of a jackal or a hyena. Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, trying to will the thing away. When he opened them, he breathed a small sigh of relief. The figure had vanished. Thomas was just about to go back to sleep when the lights in the sheds began to flicker rapidly, like someone was messing with a switch. Then they cut out, plunging the sheds into total darkness. Thomas looked around as panic and dread began to settle in. But before he could say anything, he heard another new sound. A kind of creaking sound. He looked ahead. The doors to his berth were slowly opening on their own, as if being blown by a light breeze. The engine was back, and to his horror, it seemed to be closer. Thomas stared at it, and it stared right back at him. Then, slowly, it began to move forward, its rusty side rods creaking and groaning as if they hadn't been used in years. Thomas was terrified. He tried to flee, but that only succeeded in him bashing into the closed doors behind him. As the engine drew closer, its smile seemed to grow wider, almost hungry. The little dots in its eyes became full-blown circles, and its eerie whistle sounded out. Thomas could do nothing but watch as the engine got closer and closer and closer. Thomas opened his eyes in a panic. It was daylight, and he was no longer in his shed. He was now derailed in Terrence's field, the orange tractor staring at him in confusion and worry. The breakdown train was parked nearby, and one of the crane's cables had been attached to him, and it slowly began to lift him out of the field as Thomas looked around, dazed and surprised. Then he gasped. He could see that Percy had also been derailed, his paint scratched and dirty, with a long line of derailed stone trucks sitting behind him. Toby was nearby with a single flatbed, which Thomas was carefully lowered onto. It was then that he was able to get a better look at himself. His paint was covered in mud, scratches, and leaves. His headlamp was cracked, and his lamp irons were bent out of shape. Thomas didn't know how he could have gotten from the sheds to here. The sound of someone clearing their throat caught his attention. He looked down to see the fat controller, looking up at him with a mixture of disappointment and concern. Sir? Thomas asked groggily. What happened? You're in a nasty accident, the fat controller replied. Evidently, you overworked yourself today and fell asleep on your way back to the sheds. The driver was unable to stop you as he ran a red signal and crashed into Percy. It's a miracle that nobody was injured, or worse. Now Thomas was even more confused. He was almost certain that he had made it home safely and had fallen asleep with no issue. So what was he doing here? As he looked around the crash site, searching for any clues as to how he could have gotten there, his face paled as he saw the mysterious engine in the distance, staring at him with that disturbing, hungry grin. I thought you would have known better than to overwork yourself like this, the fat controller continued, seemingly unaware of Thomas's terror. Perhaps doing some lighter duties for a few weeks will help you learn that a proper rest is very important on my railway. Thomas looked down at the stout gentleman, then back up to where the engine had been, only to find it gone. The little blue tank engine wasn't entirely sure how to explain his situation without coming across as crazy. So instead, he muttered a weak, yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Thomas doesn't make fun of Henry's fear of the fog anymore. In fact, he is often even more nervous than him whenever a thick fog is around. Sometimes at night, Thomas finds himself looking across the yard, searching for that mysterious engine. To this day, he still isn't entirely sure if what he experienced was a hallucination, a dream, or something else entirely. Regardless, Thomas is certain that he will never forget his encounter with the Stalker.